Hey everybody, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. Today's video is going to be my final Season 2.5 Dreadfane Warband review video. This time looking at Lady Harrow's Mournflight. We're basically just doing, I guess, Nagash's Will in Dreadfane / Shadespire / Beastgrave. They're the bad guys. Anyway, in this video I'm going to be looking at this warband's fighter cards, their faction-specific cards, and I'm going to rate them and compare them to all the other warbands that I have thus far rated on that scale from S to D. I mean, starting by looking at this warband's fighter cards. So this warband actually has some pretty strong fighter cards that get dwarf caliber inspiration bonuses, which I'll get to in a second. They all have a pretty cool inspire mechanic where they have to move through a hex occupied by an enemy fighter in their activation, and then obviously at the end of the activation they inspire. So a bit risky. They're also all ghosts, which means that they can ignore lethal and blocked hexes and occupied hexes, which is a very powerful mechanic. So let's just start by looking at Lady Harrow, who is pretty scary. She has a accurate melee attack, 3 swords for 2 damage, going to 3 damage with cleave when inspired. Starts with a solid 4 movement, goes to 5 movement, always has 2 dodge, which is nice, and 4 wounds. And when inspired, gets a very nice ability in which if an opponent basically makes an attack action that doesn't target her, she can be pushed at the player's choice 1 hex in any direction. Next is the Anguish one. So similar 4 movement, 2 dodge, but only has 3 wounds, but goes to 4 when inspired. Has a not so accurate melee attack, only 2 swords, but it still does 2 damage, going to 3 swords, 2 damage when inspired. And becoming incredibly accurate because crit rolls do not count as successes on defense rolls, which is insane. So super accurate attack here. Next is the Screaming Maiden, who also gets an insane attack accuracy, going from 2 swords to 4 swords. Of course, only doing 2 damage, but getting extra damage on a critical roll, which is pretty likely with 4 swords when she's inspired. Going from 4 to 5 movement, 2 dodge, maintains, starts with 3 wounds, keeps the 3 wounds. So pretty solid for sure. And finally is Widow Keitha, who's quite scary, but not very accurate. Only hitting with 2 swords, but doing 3 damage even when uninspired. Good movement when inspired, going to 5. Wounds improve from 2 to 3, so she's pretty vulnerable when uninspired, and ends up getting a special ability where she can basically teleport anywhere on the map once inspired. So all very solid units, all get huge boosts when inspired, but getting them inspired is a little bit risky. So let's look at the pros and cons. As you can see, there's a long list of pros. They have special combat abilities, basically just cleave, and only when inspired. But they do have many special abilities. Each of these guys have a unique special ability that they get when they're inspired. They're immune to terrain, so blocked hexes, lethal hexes. They can move through occupied hexes. They have high movement, especially when inspired. Good defense, generally high wounds when inspired. Decent to high accuracy when inspired. They do high damage, and they have a solid model number of 4. Meaning that they typically don't lack in activations. It doesn't happen very often where you don't really know what to do, or you've run out of activations, basically. Cons being that they have a somewhat challenging inspire mechanic, but I mean, it's not so much that it's challenging that it's risky. And they also have no range capabilities, but I mean, overall, pros of the fighter cards definitely outweigh the cons by a lot. So that does it for the fighter cards. Let's take a look at their objective cards. Starting with their Surge cards, there's Fleeting Memories. Score this immediately when a friendly fighter finishes a move action, and enter 2 or more different hexes that contain an objective during that move action, worth 1 glory. So I'm giving this an S. I mean, it's just a guaranteed glory score immediate. If you play your cards right too, you can just move them through an enemy and inspire the guy at the same time. Frozen in Place. Score this immediately after an activation if 1 or more enemy fighters each have 1 or more guard tokens, worth 1 glory. So I'm giving this B because it's kind of out of the player's control whether or not a fighter puts a guard token on one of their units, but I mean, it could happen. This card might be worth a C. Next is Inescapable Hunger. Score this immediately when a friendly fighter makes a move action through 1 or more blocked hexes and ends that move action adjacent to an enemy fighter, worth 1 glory. So I'm also going to give this an S because it's just so easy to score. Can also end up inspiring your guy. Next is One Will, which is actually so good, it's restricted in championship play. Scores immediately if your warband holds 1 or more even numbered objectives and 1 or more odd numbered objectives, worth 1. Also an S, it's just a guarantee, effortless score, and it's score immediate. And we have Special Vortex. Score this immediately when an enemy fighter is the target of a second or subsequent successful attack action in this phase, and each attack action was made by a different friendly fighter. So I'm giving this a B because it's definitely within your control to make the attack actions, but the fact that they have to be successful is not a guarantee. And that does it for the Surge. So let's move on to the score in the end phase cards, starting with Bitter Embrace. Score this in an end phase if there are 2 or more surviving friendly fighters, and each surviving friendly fighter is adjacent to 1 or more enemy fighters worth 2 glory. So I'm giving this an A, especially in the late phase. If you only have 2 fighters left, this becomes very easy to score. But rereading this, it might be worth a B because there are a lot of factors that are out of your control in this one. Next is Creeping Dead. Score this in an end phase if there are 3 or more surviving friendly fighters, and each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more move or charge tokens, worth 1 glory. So I'm giving this a B. Could be worth an A though, because it's pretty easy to pull off, but it's only worth 1 in an end phase. Ghostly Torment. Score this in an end phase if there are 2 or more surviving friendly fighters, and 2 or more surviving fighters each have 1 or more wound tokens, worth 2 glory. So I'm giving this an A as well, because it's pretty likely to happen that a couple of your guys get hurt and don't die. I mean, obviously it's not a guarantee, but it is worth 2 glory, which is pretty solid. Next is Nagash's Tith. Score this in an end phase if there are more enemy fighters out of action than friendly fighters out of action, worth 1. So I'm giving this a B. I mean, it could be better because all your guys are pretty solid, especially when they're inspired. So odds are that, at least if you're fighting a large warband, they will have more guys out of action than you. But then it's only worth 1 in an end phase, so not so great. Fourth, we have Nexus of Terror. Score this in end phase if your warband holds the most objectives, worth 2 glory. So I'm giving this an A. I've seen it get played successfully pretty often. It can even be pulled off, you know, if you're lucky, by holding 1 objective. And it's worth 2, so I like it. And finally, Tide of Malice. Score this in an end phase if there are 2 or more surviving friendly fighters, and each surviving friendly fighter is inspired, worth 2 glory. Also giving this an A, because it is a very manageable thing to achieve. And that does it for the score in the end phase cards. Final card, score in the 3rd end phase, is Dominion of Death. Scores in the 3rd end phase if you have scored the most objective cards, worth 3 glory. I'm giving this an S because it's very likely to be achieved, especially with their easy to score immediately cards. These guys are very good at scoring objective cards. And then just getting 3 in an end phase is just a huge end game benefit. So that does it for the objective cards, which typically promote tactical movement, inspiring friendly fighters, swarming enemies, attacking enemy fighters, holding objective tokens, taking advantage of enemy actions, activating friendly fighters, taking wounds, and scoring objective cards. Now next we're going to be moving on to the power cards, starting with the Ploys. Call of the Grave. Choose an enemy fighter and push them up to 2 hexes towards a friendly fighter. I'm giving this an S. This is very nice. Allows you to tactically pull an enemy 2 hexes, which is nice in and of itself. Then you could pull them into danger right next to a friendly fighter or near a friendly fighter, so you can then start moving and swarming and inspiring. It's a very good card. Next is Chilling Scream. Your opponents cannot play power cards. This persists until the end of the power step. So I'm giving this an A. It can be nice, but you'd never really know if your opponent is planning on playing power cards, so it could be a wasted play. Next is Dissipate. As a reaction, play this during an attack action before the attack roll. Choose a friendly fighter. That fighter gains an innate dodge. This persists until the attack action ends or until that friendly fighter is taken out of action. So very solid defense boost for 1 attack. I'm giving this an A. Next is Echoing Spite. As a reaction, play this after a friendly fighter's range 1 attack that fails. That fighter can make the attack again. I'm giving this a B because I've given B to basically the identical card that exists in different warbands, but after talking to some people online, it is actually worth an A, so let's just agree that this is actually worth an A. It's very nice to get that double swing. Next is Enervating Sorrow. As a reaction, play this when an opponent plays a ploy. Before that ploy is resolved, that opponent can discard a power card. If they do not, the ploy is not resolved. So a huge douche move. I'm giving this an A. We have Frightful Aspect. You push an enemy fighter 1 hex. It's distraction. It's an A. And we have Shared Agony. Choose a friendly fighter with 1 or more wound tokens and an enemy fighter adjacent to them. Heal 1 to the friendly fighter and deal 1 damage to the enemy fighter. Super awesome card. I'm giving this an S. Next is Soaring Spite. Double the move characteristic of the first friendly fighter to make a move action. Not as part of a charge though, in the next activation. I'm giving this a B because I've given other cards with similar effects a B. It is a nice movement boost, but it could be worth an A because it does align very well with a few of these guys' score immediate objective cards, as well as their Inspire mechanic. Next is Spectral Charge. +1 damage on the first range 1 or 2 attack action made by a friendly fighter in the next activation. Just a reliable increase in damage. If you make the attack, of course, so that's worth a B. And we have Spectral Grasp. Reduce the move characteristic of the first fighter to be activated in the next activation by the number of friendly fighters that are out of action to a minimum of 0. So definitely not a guarantee, but it can be a big screw job if the stars sort of align on this one. I'm going to give it a B. It's okay. And that does it for the ploys, which typically promote pushing enemy fighters, increasing accuracy of attacks, causing and improving damage, healing friendly fighters, improving defense, inhibiting enemy power cards, improving movement, and inhibiting enemy movement. All right, so now we're going to move on to the power cards. We start with Arcane Siphon. As an action, choose an enemy fighter within 3 hexes of this fighter. Pick one of that fighter's upgrades. That upgrade is discarded. Roll an attack dice. On a roll of hammer or crit, discard this card. So you get to break enemy fighters' upgrades, which could be hugely consequential to them. And then you could even use this thing more than once if it doesn't break. So I'm giving this an A. I mean, could be worth an S. I just don't see it get played that often, so I'm giving it an A. Next is Debilitating Aura. The attack actions of adjacent enemies have -1 dice. Always. I'm giving this an S because it is super crippling, especially with Lady Harrow, who can kind of flutter around and just get adjacent to people and screw them over. This is a really intense card. Next is Gravesand Glass. As a reaction after an attack action or ploy that takes the enemy fighter out of action, heal 1 to this fighter, restricted to Lady Harrow. I'm giving this a B, it's okay. Next is Hollow Hatred. You can re-roll 1 dice in the attack roll of the first attack action this fighter makes in each round. So pretty reliable in proven accuracy, so I'm giving this an A. Maddening Hunger. This fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions have +1 dice if they have a charge token. I'm giving this a C, I mean maybe a D. Because, I mean, unless you have an out-of-turn attack action, you can't really benefit from this card. Next is Soul Harvest. As an action, if 1 or more enemy fighters are out of action, heal 1 to this fighter and give this fighter a guard token. So basically allows you to heal when you guard, so it's pretty nice. I'm giving it a B. Next is Soul Leech. As a reaction after this fighter makes a move action, roll an attack dice. On a roll of hammer or crit, the first enemy fighter they moved through in that move action is dealt 1 damage. So potentially damaging enemies that you move through. I'm giving it a B because it can be pretty nice. Next is Spirit Blade. While 1 or more enemy fighters are out of action, this fighter has the following attack action. 3 swords, 3 damage, cleave. So just a really solid attack, assuming an enemy's already been taken out of action. I'm giving it an A. Swooping Dash, a straight up 2 move bonus. Super nice. That's an S. And Veil of Grief, which is just a +1 wound bonus. Also very nice. I'm giving that an A. So that does it for the upgrades, which typically promote causing damage, reducing enemy accuracy, increasing movement, healing, improving defense, improving accuracy, destroying enemy upgrades, and providing at least 1 exceptional weapon upgrade. And here's the overall grid. So as you can see, these guys have some amazing objective cards. 4 S caliber that you're never leaving home without. 4 A caliber that you're probably never leaving home without. Gambits are really good. Upgrades are really good. Their fighter cards are really good. You can probably imagine how I'm going to be rating this warband. So this is my overview. They have a very strong array of objective cards, lots of passive and aggressive glory. They have a strong array of power cards. They viciously impair enemies while giving themselves large boosts to their versatile playstyle. They have many special abilities. Anytime a unit gets inspired, they get one of these abilities. They can hit hard, they can hit accurately, and they can cover a lot of ground with their 5 movement. And they have a somewhat difficult inspire mechanic, or rather risky inspire mechanic. This is alleviated by their amazing power cards, and they also get a huge boost when they inspire, which makes it worth taking that risk. So overall, I'm giving these guys a rank of S. They are very good. This doesn't even include the fact that they're immune to terrain, which is a huge benefit that all the ghosts get. So if you look at the full grid here, you can see that the 2 ghost warbands are still ranked as S, but I would put Lady Harrow's Mournflight slightly behind Thorns of the Briar Queen because I feel like they are less versatile and overpowering, but they're not far behind. So that does it for this review video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And as you may have guessed, in the description, I'm going to be posting a video of my balancing recommendation for Lady Harrow's Mournflight to make them a little bit nerfed, to allow other warbands to be a bit more competitive against them. So you can go check that out as well. Anyway, I thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a nice day.